Have you ever heard of a drug that shows like incredible promise,
Yeah.
just sales through those early trials,
Mm-hmm.
only to get yanked at the last minute?
Mm-hmm.
Because it turns out it causes some kind of like serious heart problem or something.
Yeah.
It would be like investing years of research and millions of dollars just to hit a brick wall at the very end.
Right. It's a huge problem.
That's the kind of nightmare scenario that early safety screening is designed to prevent.
Exactly. And it's not just about dodging the obvious poisons.
Right.
We really need to get a good understanding of all the subtle ways that a drug can interact with the body.
Okay.
Because sometimes those interactions, they can have some really unexpected consequences.
Yeah, even dangerous ones, right?
Definitely.
So today we're going deep on those crucial early tests.
Yeah.
The ones that can help weed out those problematic drug candidates before they go too far.
Right.
We'll be looking at how those tests work, why they matter so much, and what makes drug metabolism such a fascinating
Yeah.
and sometimes tricky area.
He really is fascinating.
You've given us a really interesting mix of materials for this deep dive.
Well, I tried to find some good stuff.
Yeah, we have excerpts from textbooks on medicinal chemistry and drug development,
Mm-hmm.
some really intriguing research papers, and even sections on the role of AI in all of this.
Well, AI is becoming a bigger and bigger part of the field.
That's right.
So it's important to understand how it's being used.
Absolutely. So our goal today is to get a handle on this concept of fail fast, fail cheap in drug development.
Yeah, that's a key principle.
It seems like it's all about identifying and eliminating those risky candidates early on before they cause problems down the line.
Exactly. It's all about making smart decisions from the get-go.
It's kind of like how software developers will use rapid prototyping to find flaws before they go and build out this whole program, right?
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
It's like you catch it early before you put in all that time and effort.
Exactly. You got to find those bugs early.
Okay, so one of the key tools in this early screening process is the hERG inhibition assay.
Right. That's one of the big ones.
Okay, break that down for me.
Sure.
What exactly is the hERG channel and why is blocking it such a big deal?
Well, the hERG channel, it plays a really critical role in the electrical signals that control your heartbeat.
Okay.
And if a drug blocks this channel, it can really disrupt that delicate balance.
Yeah.
And that can lead to an irregular heartbeat.
Oh, wow.
And specifically, a very dangerous rhythm problem called torsades de pointe.
I remember reading about the case of terfenadine or Seldane being pulled from the market because it was linked to that exact heart problem.
Yeah, that was a big one.
That must have been a major setback.
It was, and terfenadine is a classic example of what we call a prodrug.
Okay.
It's actually inactive in its original form, and it has to be metabolized by your body into active compounds.
Okay.
But unfortunately, one of those metabolites turned out to be a very potent hERG inhibitor.
So the drug itself didn't actually cause the problem,
Right.
but its byproduct did.
Right, exactly.
That's a really sneaky twist.
It really is, and it highlights why understanding a drug's metabolic pathway is absolutely crucial.
Okay.
We need to know how the drug itself behaves, but also how it breaks down in the body and what those resulting compounds might do.
That's where fexofenadine or Allegra came in, right?
Yeah, that's a good example.
I was like scientists realizing that they could just use the active metabolite of terfenadine,
Right.
which provides the antihistamine benefit
Yeah.
without that hERG blocking effect.
Exactly. So they basically created a safer version of the drug.
That's a pretty clever solution. So it seems like identifying these potential problems early on, like with the hERG test, can actually lead to the development of safer alternatives.
Absolutely. It's all about finding ways to mitigate risk.
Another drug that we have some information on is celecoxib, a COX2 inhibitor used for pain and inflammation.
Right.
And the research you provided really dives into its metabolism and particularly the role of a specific liver enzyme called CYP2C9.
It's a really important enzyme.
Okay, why is that enzyme so important in this case?
Well, it gets into the concept of polymorphism,
Okay,
which basically means that there are variations in how each of us metabolizes drugs
okay,
based on our genetic makeup.
gotcha.
Some people might break down a drug very quickly, others more slowly.
Interesting.
And those differences can really have a big impact on a drug's effectiveness and its safety.
So understanding how CYP2C9 interacts with celecoxib could help predict potential drug-drug interactions
Yeah, that's a big part of it.
and even identify individuals who might be more sensitive to side effects.
Exactly. It's all about moving towards personalized medicine,
Interesting.
tailoring treatments to individuals for maximum benefit and minimal risk.
It makes sense, but even with our best efforts, there are always going to be cases where toxicity is only discovered after a drug has been on the market.
That's true.
Like triglyceridone for liver toxicity and rofecoxib for cardiovascular risks, those come to mind.
Yeah, those are unfortunate examples.
It's a sobering reminder that we can never be too careful when it comes to drug safety.
Definitely, it's an ongoing
It's
process.
this balance of getting potentially life-saving medications to people quickly,
Right.
but also making sure that they're truly safe.
It's a tough balance to strike.
Which brings us to this growing role of artificial intelligence in drug discovery.
AI is changing everything.
And you included some really interesting material on AI-driven toxicity prediction models.
It's a rapidly developing field.
Yeah, it sounds like these AI models are trained on huge amounts of data about chemical structures
Mm-hmm.
and their known toxicities.
Right, they're learning to spot those red flags.
It's like they can learn to spot those red flags before we even start testing in the lab.
It's pretty amazing.
And one of the most promising AI platforms out there is called ADME-Net.
Yeah, ADME-Net's doing some great work.
It uses deep learning to analyze molecular structures
Right.
and predict how they'll interact with biological targets.
Including potential toxicity issues.
So instead of testing millions of compounds,
Yeah.
we can use AI to narrow down the search and focus on the most promising candidates.
And hopefully the safest.
And hopefully the safest. But AI is still just a tool, right?
Of course, it's not replacing scientists anytime soon.
Right. We still need that human expertise
Absolutely. Humans are still in charge.
to interpret the data, make the decisions, and consider all the factors involved.
It's a collaboration.
AI can provide those incredible insights,
Right.
but ultimately it's up to us to use that information wisely.
That's the key. Yeah, it's a partnership,
Right.
AI can process information and spot patterns in ways that humans just can't.
Yeah.
But we bring the critical thinking, the ethical considerations, and the understanding of the big picture.
Right. It makes you wonder, like, how AI might change the whole landscape of drug development in the years to come. Do you think we'll ever see a day when AI can predict and prevent drug toxicity with, like, 100% accuracy?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, right?
Right.
AI is making incredible strides.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important to remember that biology is incredibly complex. There will always be nuances and unexpected interactions and new challenges that we haven't even thought of yet.
Right. So it's not about replacing human scientists. It's about giving them a powerful new tool to work with.
Exactly. Think of it like this.
Okay.
AI can help us to narrow down the possibilities,
Okay.
identify the most likely risks, and speed up the testing process.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still up to the human experts to make that final call,
Right.
considering all the scientific and ethical factors involved.
Speaking of narrowing down possibilities,
Yeah.
let's circle back to that fail fast, fail cheap concept.
Okay.
It seems like AI could really supercharge that approach.
Absolutely. The earlier we can identify potential problems, the better.
Right.
And AI can help us to do that on a much larger scale.
Yeah.
Screening thousands, even millions of compounds very quickly and efficiently.
So instead of spending years and huge sums of money developing a drug that ultimately fails in those later trials,
Right.
we can use AI to weed out those problematic candidates early on.
Exactly. It's all about making the whole drug development process smarter, faster, and ultimately more successful.
And that means getting those safe and effective medications to the people who need them sooner,
Right. Exactly.
which is a win for everybody.
Right.
But we've been focusing a lot on toxicity.
Sure.
What about those other parts of ADME-Tox,
Okay.
like the absorption, distribution, and excretion?
Right.
How do those factor into that early safety screening process?
Well, they're all interconnected. Think of it like a journey that the drug takes through your body.
Okay.
First, it needs to be absorbed into the bloodstream.
Mhm.
Then it's distributed to the target tissues,
Okay.
metabolized into active or inactive compounds,
Right.
and finally excreted from the body.
So it's not just about whether a drug is inherently toxic.
Right.
It's also about how it moves through the body and how that might influence its safety and its effectiveness.
Exactly. So, for example, a drug that's poorly absorbed, it might never reach the levels needed to actually be effective.
Yep.
On the other hand, a drug that's eliminated very slowly could build up in the body and increase the risk of side effects.
So early screening needs to look at the whole picture,
Mm-hmm.
the entire journey of that drug within the body.
A whole life cycle.
And I bet AI can play a role here too.
Right? Absolutely. AI can help us model those complex interactions,
Yeah, okay.
predict how a drug will be absorbed, distributed, metabolized, and excreted, and flag potential problems that might not be obvious just from looking at its chemical structure.
It's amazing to think about how much data is involved in all of this.
It's a lot of data.
And one area you mentioned that I found particularly intriguing was the world of reactive metabolites.
Ah, yes, those are the troublemakers.
Yeah, they can be real troublemakers.
They're often the culprits behind some pretty dramatic and unexpected drug reactions.
Yeah, the materials you gave me talked about them being like these sneaky molecules
Yeah,
that can cause all sorts of trouble.
that's a good way to put it. And what makes them so fascinating and challenging is that they often arise from the breakdown of a drug in the body.
Ah.
So the drug itself might seem perfectly safe,
Yeah.
but then one of its metabolites turns out to be highly reactive,
Oh, wow.
and it can bind to proteins or even damage DNA.
That sounds pretty scary.
It can be, and sometimes these effects aren't discovered until a drug's been on the market for a while.
Right, which is why that post-marketing surveillance is so important.
It's an ongoing process. We're always learning and refining our understanding.
So how does scientists even begin to identify these reactive metabolites early on?
Right.
It seems like finding a needle in a haystack.
It is a bit like that. It's a combination of approaches.
Oh, okay.
Scientists will use experimental techniques to study how drugs are metabolized.
Right.
They'll develop computational models to predict potential reactive metabolites,
Hmm.
and they even rely on their own experience and intuition to identify potential red flags.
So it sounds like a bit of art and a lot of science all rolled into one.
You got it. And this is another area where AI is starting to make a really significant impact.
I bet.
AI models are being trained to analyze massive data sets of drug structures and their metabolic profiles
Okay.
to identify patterns that might predict the formation of those reactive metabolites.
It's like having a superpowered detective that can sift through all those clues and pinpoint the suspects before they even commit the crime.
It's a great way to think about it.
So cool. So we're constantly developing new tools and techniques to make drug development safer and more efficient.
That's the goal.
But with all these advances, I imagine there are still plenty of challenges and unknowns ahead.
Oh, absolutely. Biology is incredibly complex.
Yeah.
And we're always learning new things.
Right.
But that's what makes this work so fascinating. We're constantly pushing the boundaries of knowledge and working to develop better, safer medications for everybody.
It is incredible to think how far we've come in understanding how drugs interact with the human body.
It's amazing.
But as you said, there's always more to learn.
Always more to learn. There really is always more to learn.
It feels like we've only just scratched the surface of this like incredibly complex field.
Yeah, it is.
Like so much goes on behind the scenes to just bring a new drug to market.
It's really a monumental effort.
Yeah.
It involves years of research,
Yeah.
countless experiments,
Mm-hmm.
and the dedication of so many talented people.
Right. It's not a one-person job.
Definitely not. And as we've seen, there are so many factors to consider,
Yeah.
from a drug's chemical structure to how it interacts with your body's own unique biochemistry.
Yeah. It's amazing to think about that journey a drug takes from
Yeah.
like the initial discovery phase to those really rigorous preclinical tests,
Right.
then through the clinical trials, and finally, if it's successful, to like your medicine cabinet.
Yeah, it's a long road.
A really long road.
And even then, the journey's not over.
No.
Post-marketing surveillance is really crucial.
Oh, yeah. You always hear about that.
Yeah, it's all about identifying any long-term effects or rare side effects that might not have shown up in that earlier testing.
You really can't be too careful.
Nope, safety is paramount.
It makes you appreciate all the work that goes into ensuring that the medications that we all take are both effective and safe.
It really does. It's a huge responsibility.
So what does all of this mean for, like, the listener, the person who might one day benefit from these new medications?
Well, it means that when you pick up a prescription,
Yeah.
you can have confidence that it's been through a really rigorous process
Right?
to evaluate both its safety and its efficacy. Scientists are constantly working to improve our understanding of how drugs interact with the body
Yeah.
and to develop new tools and techniques to predict and prevent potential problems.
It's reassuring to know that so much effort is being put into ensuring that our medications are as safe as possible.
Yeah, we're all working towards the same goal.
But even with all of these advances, do you think there will always be an element of risk involved in taking any medication?
That's a great question. And while we strive to minimize risk, Every drug does have the potential for side effects.
Of course.
Biology is incredibly complex,
Right.
and there will always be individual variations in how people respond to medications.
So it's about finding that balance, right?
Hmm.
Between the potential benefit and the potential risk.
Absolutely, and that's why open communication between you and your healthcare provider is so important.
It really
By
is.
discussing your medical history,
Hmm.
any other medications you might be taking,
Right.
and any potential concerns you might have, you can work together to make those really informed decisions about your treatment.
It's a reminder that we're all part of this process, both as individuals and as a society. Like, we benefit from these scientific advancements,
Right.
but we also have a responsibility to be, like, informed and engaged in our own healthcare.
Well said. And I think that's a perfect note to end on.
Yeah.
As we wrap up this deep dive into the world of early safety screening, I hope you come away with a greater appreciation for the incredible amount of work that goes into developing safe and effective medications.
I know, I do. It's been a fascinating journey.
It has.
And I have to say, I'm feeling a lot more informed
That's great to hear.
and maybe even a little bit empowered, knowing all that goes on behind the scenes to keep us healthy.
That's what we hope for.
So as we sign off, I'd like to leave our listeners with just this one thought.
Okay.
We've talked about these incredible advances in AI
Right.
and how they're really transforming drug development. But imagine a future where AI can not only predict toxicity, but also design entirely new drugs
Oh, wow.
that are tailored to your unique genetic makeup.
That would be incredible.
Like drugs with maximum effectiveness and minimal side effects.
Of a holy grail.
Yeah, it's a future that's closer than you might think.
It really is.
And it's definitely a future worth getting excited about.